Okay, I've gone completely mad here. I want you to take a look at 10 cameras. Which one of these feels the best to you? I'm not going to tell you what they are yet. I'm going to tell you that they're all at the same position. Some of them have speed boosters if they can take speed boosters, and they all are using the same lens at about the same f-stop. So the changes in the native ISO were adjusted to get the most dynamic range per image. As you can see, the window's blown out, but you can usually see the outside through the TV reflection on the right. Total, I would say this is like 20 stops of dynamic range from the shadows to the outside. It's kind of surprising that they look as close as they do, considering it goes all the way back from the GH1 to the GH6 with everything in between. So you're going to have to tell me what you think is best. Now we're going to take the first two side by side. What do you see here? I see lots of noise on the right, very clean on the left. The right is actually native 4K. The left is AI upscaled. I think the image on the right may be the worst of this whole batch. This next one's going to ruffle a few feathers. On the right, we have a wider image, a much older image. And on the left, we have a native 4K image. One is very old, one is very new. Which one do you like better? Look how close they are, and they are 10 years apart. These next two are also extremely interesting. One shocks me every time, and one was ultra expensive 10 years ago. Can you tell which? What do you think about the two? I think they both look fantastic. Here's the two easiest to use cameras in the whole batch. Both considered very professional. One is 1080p. One is 4K. Can you tell which one was upsampled and which one has maybe a tenth of the bitrate? One of these is really old and AI upscaled. The other is a cult classic. Can you tell which? Both have their spots and are very interesting. And with this, we conclude our 10. Now let's start talking about each one individually. The number one camera, if you couldn't tell before with the UV issues, is our upscaled Blackmagic Cinema Camera. Still being as old as it is, it has a ton of dynamic range and has a very, very pleasing image. Number two is what I called the worst image in this bunch, and I still stick with that. This is the Panasonic GH4 and Vlog Lite. There's something about the Vlog Lite with this sensor with its 4K crop that just is noisy. It's always noisy. It always has some weird color issues. And to avoid the color issues, you can make it even more grainy. And I think from this point, the GH5 was better. This is definitely worse than the GH1 and the GH2. Speaking of which, take a look at this image. Look at the dynamic range here, just with exposing to the right. This is the GH2. It is old. It has a hack bitrate. It's AI upscaled here, but look how nice and neutral this image is. It's kind of mind-blowing that it's been so long, and it really shows you that you can have an excellent camera for cheap. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars to have a great image. You can have a great image for $300 as long as you have the software to process it and upscale it later. It looks great at 4K. I mean, really, look at this again compared to some of the other samples. And we get to the wild card of the bunch. It bugs me how good this camera looks, because even though I've bought several cameras after this, the Nikon Z6 still continually with its 8-bit codec, just a flat profile, looks amazing. The noise, there's something about that full frame sensor. It just, I wouldn't be surprised even with other full frame sensors. You put a Sony full frame sensor, Nikon has a software running on it. It looks fantastic. And the contentious one. This is the Panasonic GH6. Yes, the colors are excellent. The dynamic range is excellent, mostly, but there's noise. And I don't understand why Panasonic changes the sensor size all over the place. The GH2 is like 1.89, 1.85 crop. why not go back to that? That little bit extra adds a whole lot. And the smaller the sensor gets with vlog or any of these log profiles, the more noise that seems to come out. I think even the GH5S is a little bit less noisy than this. I don't have one of these to test. Otherwise, we would be looking at that too. And here is the pricey boy. If you had a $15,000 in 2013, the top high-end camera was the Canon 1DC. You had to be insane to buy it for a 1DX with a bigger heatsink for, what was it, $5,000 more. But man, this makes a really interesting image. The codec is horrible. That MJPEG at 500 megabits, have to transcode it, but the results may actually be worth it. It's 1.3 crop. It's in between all the other crops here. Still has that full frame look. Man, I really like the colors and dynamic range of this. It's really Alexa-like. And I guess my whole goal is to get to that Alexa image in a smaller, lightweight package. And this definitely does that. This next camera makes me love Canon. We went from one Canon to the next. This is the C100 Mk2, and it is AI upscaled. Still looks excellent. It is a bit noisy, but we could fix that Canon if you gave us 25 more megabits. Yes, the 24 megabits that you so graciously gave us runs out of steam when you try to express the full 12 stops. You could shoot a little bit more careful here, but man, this camera really would be my absolute favorite if it just ran a little bit. There's so much potential in that camera. It needs a hack. If this camera was hacked, absolutely the best of the bunch. But unhacked, it's somewhere in between it all. And I don't know how to grade it. But the camera that you want to pick up and run with the most, easiest, definitely the C100. From the C100 to Panasonic's best, this is the Panasonic EVA1. Man, this camera it's very Panasonic. The menus are worse than the handheld cameras, but I understand why. So you can dial them on the fly. The NDs are awesome. It's like a super GH camera. If you wanted a super 35 GH camera, this is it. And it has even less noise processing than those cameras. Has awesome dynamic range, and it has those internal NDs. So most of the irritation that you get from using a small little camera, that goes away with the EVA1. So no, it's not an S1 or an S1H, but it's better in a way that you can actually handle it and maneuver it in ways and rig it in ways with XLR that are not some silly handheld camera. So I wish there was an EVA 2. The EVA 1's still really underrated, and you can get these really cheap. I got this almost as low a price as my C100, which is crazy, but it definitely has that high-end Vericam quality to it. This one just makes me curse Samsung. This is the NX1, and it's actually still, I think, the sharpest camera here, and not sharp in an over-sharpened way. It's sharp in a way that you can clearly see the downscaling for an absolutely pixel-perfect 4K, which is amazing. At the same time, you can't. This system is dead, so you get the native lenses. When your camera dies, you're going to have to. These cameras will all die at some point, and Samsung isn't going to bring them back, which is, well, definitely something Samsung does. Talk about their phones without batteries. But the camera is fantastic. It was groundbreaking at the time, and this is actually hacked too. So, man, I can't believe that Samsung gave up on this when they could have just destroyed the entire camera market from this point. Imagine Samsung taking this sensor and building a cinema camera around it. It would have been unstoppable. Camera 10. This is the first camera I got after my Nikon D90. And look at it in 2022. You wouldn't be doing this with the D90. This is the Panasonic GH1 hacked. And I'm trying to refocus it, and I'm going to replay the clip a couple times here because it just didn't really fully resolve 1080p, where the GH2 did. And the GH2 and the GH1 are very similar in a way. And I don't know why I'm talking this long about the GH1, or try to refocus it again. But the GH1 also had the fixed pattern noise that was fixed with the GH2. There's a huge improvements from the GH1 to the GH2 that really come through. If you look back at the GH2 in this, it looks amazing. In the GH1, you can see that potential, but it never quite got there from that. It's still an interesting camera to have. It's kind of horrible to focus, and it doesn't really resolve 1080p.